Hello, and welcome to other veterans and veteran wannabes and people that should know about real life experiences of those that have served the United States and its Constitution. My name is Tom Tierney. I'm a veteran of 11 years, having graduated from Wayne State University in ROTC, moved through the Air Force in a variety of assignments, and decided to leave the Air Force in 1971. But we'll talk about that. It was all for the good of the public and my career, actually. The association with the ROTC is rather interesting because at Wayne State University, my major, supposedly academically, was business, but I wanted to fly in the worst way. And after entering flying training, after receiving my commission through college, we found that actually it was safer for the people on the ground if I was not in the cockpit, but perhaps behind a desk. And that begins a great journey from supply school, not terribly romantic, through nuclear weapons loading, through a think tank in Santa Monica, California, through an assignment as Deputy Chief of Logistics Planning during the Tet Offensive, and then back home, ultimately as a civilian. And in that journey, a little part of it related to comic books. In fact, a little vignette is we could think of this not because of the suffering, I don't want to be cute, but it was effectively technology that evolved from a comic book, like the comic book war. I mean, some of you may remember way back in the 50s and 60s of the 10, 15, 25, and later 50-cent paper comics, where we had Buck Rogers, Captain Marvel, and all of the technology that came from spacecraft that supposedly were always round balls with antennas sticking out of them, nothing like they look like today. But that fantasy talked about robots or drones in the atmosphere that actually defended us or were offensively oriented. And you know, during my career in the Air Force, I found that translating into actual hard technology. In fact, while assigned to Strategic Air Command headquarters, we had at the then secret projects where BQM-34s made by Ryan Aircraft that we paid to have shot down as targets were used later as drones, unthinking, unpiloted, but pre-programmed aircraft that flew over hostile territory, over Hanoi, Haiphong Harbor, armed with nothing more than cameras, and in later years, electronic devices to capture fire control systems from SAM missiles. It was a great adventure. In fact, during Vietnam, while many of us were suffering, not me, where many civilians were suffering, while we were overloaded with people, we fought a war that was somewhat remote because we had technology that would fly, that would exceed the biological capacity of men and women by pulling 7 or 8 Gs, by staying aloft without having a lunch break or the need to go to wash one's hands or whatever. It was really romantic, but it was a toy for many people. Factually, it was the beginning of a new future for all the military services, removing the human being, us, from relative risk and deploying our forces above the forward edge of the battle area. Now, we can talk about philosophy all day, but here's the way it is. We actually set the precedent, and all the other nations on the planet that are reasonably industrialized are following us because they too don't want to have a hardcore infrastructure to support people that eat, that need medical attention, that have families that don't want them deployed. So the comic book war is somewhat the antithesis of reality. It isn't a fantasy anymore. It's real. So while in Vietnam, I worked with some interesting people, 3-letter agencies, other services, and worked with the Ryan Firebee people where we took these drones, hooked them under the wings of C-130 cargo aircraft, flew them up to the forward edge of the battle area and launched them. They'd go 60,000 feet above Haiphong Harbor, as an example, take pictures, and all the technology that was associated with bringing them back, they programmed to come back to their home base, in this case, Da Nang, popped a parachute at 15,000 feet with the engine cut off, of course, And lo and behold, high technology, we used unbailment Marine Corps CH-53C helicopters with grappling hooks to catch the parachute. And what a marvel it was when the parachute went around in circles because of the rotor wash. Lucky enough to catch them, we took them back, dropped them on the ground for reuse, we hoped in the future, took out the cameras and said, look at the tops of those great clouds. Of course, it wasn't always that way. Sometimes it was exactly what we wanted. Well, after the assignment in Vietnam, I was assigned as one of 7 Air Force officers at the Air Force's think tank, the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica. That was an adventure as a military man because I was required to wear civilian clothes because people spat upon us, thinking that the people that were assigned to combat areas caused the combat. We might consider aiming that vociferous outlay of liquids on Congress people and senators. Not all of them, of course, and this isn't political. It's about technology. So in the RAND Corporation, we started to develop unclassified for this video, the whole theory of swarms of remotely piloted vehicles. And the evolution of this came to the point where we'd like to have some judgment associated with so-called robots or drones. So we put a pilot in there and we started talking about remotely piloted vehicles. Think of the P as for pay. We could steer to an objective from the ground, and that's what's happening today with the Predator, the Global Hawk, and so many other sophisticated systems. More to come. Remotely piloted vehicles will actually move us where I've been from Mercury, Nevada, a fire control system from there with the appropriate intelligence and authoritative release, something on the order of 1.7 seconds to the Middle East somewhere over a hostile environment, and a Hellfire missile can be launched. It isn't all right there. Now, the tactical commander will have the short range capabilities. The strategic commanders will have them. But where does this all go? And the wonder of where it's going is because we don't want to have a big civilian infrastructure, a big military support structure. What if we had so-called drones or remotely piloted submarines, aircraft carriers, satellites? It's a very interesting theory. A long endurance submarine laying in the mud for 10 years, ready to wake up and carry on its mission. What about an aircraft carrier where it could be personed up in the bridge, but downstairs below decks, robots actually configured the weapon systems, aircraft perhaps, change the weapons loads, all with just the push of the button, put the vehicle on an elevator and launched it with no pilot on board. That's where technology is, because that's where the dream is. Now, there's so much more, but organizationally, I was invited to speak at the Air Force Academy and gave them a scenario where this wonderful mission was going on with 5 remotely piloted vehicles. You would walk in as an operator, be sat down in front of a console with a flight engineer. You're in this wonderful executive chair. Somebody comes in, of course, and say, "Excuse me, sir, coffee, tea, or milk?" And you would be assigned your mission profile. We'll make this a little bit light. You fly your mission profile. You fly yourself into a tunnel, you take pictures, you capture electronic signals. When a missile is being sent at you, you're sacrificed as a $1 million vehicle, but not as a person. But then what happens is when the mission is over, we come to find out that the people flying the missions are enlisted people. They aren't college-educated, degreed pilots that are looking for career advancements. They're technicians. And we know the services are always run by the sergeants and the naval cadets, by the officers that are of lower rank, not all admirals. We're talking about seamen that can actually fly missiles because they are technically educated. We don't need those people that always wanted to just fly and fight. Got a lot of booze. But the fact of the matter is, technology will replace people, but a different kind of people will emerge, highly technically qualified. Now, where does it all go? It should go at the beginning of the comic book war. Where how about literature and comic books that imprint and show us how to make peace instead of loud kinetic wars? That's where the future is. And the future is with us right now. We can create it by how we immerse our next generation and carry them forward for a planet that has no corners. I think that's all for now. You pretty much have an idea of some of the experiences from nuclear weapons loading, from working as a supply officer. And if you have the want to, you can go anywhere, not just in the service, but in life. And I hope that it'll take you in a direction to making it safe for this and all future generations. Thanks for listening.